Lil Durk just went through one of the most explosive moments of his legal battles to date, after prosecutors allegedly brought forward fake evidence to extend his stay behind bars. Tensions erupted so intensely that it led to a heated verbal exchange in court, a physical confrontation behind closed doors, and ultimately, Lil Durk being punched by a federal prosecutor, though Durk kept his composure and did not retaliate. This moment could change the trajectory of his entire case and expose the deep corruption at play. In a courtroom where freedom hangs by a thread and reputations are reshaped daily, rapper Lil Durk is no stranger to pressure. But even by his standards, the events of the last court session were beyond comprehension. What was supposed to be a routine update on his pending release turned into a volatile spectacle, where tempers boiled over, evidence was manipulated, and a line was crossed that has left the entire hip-hop community and parts of the legal world shocked. It all began with the appearance of new evidence. Federal prosecutors walked into the courtroom with what they described as incriminating material intended to further justify why Durk should remain in custody. But according to sources inside the courtroom, it didn't take long for Durk's defense to notice that something was terribly off. The evidence in question, allegedly surveillance footage and text messages, appeared doctored badly. Timestamps didn't line up. Faces were blurred unnaturally. And key data points that could have verified authenticity were mysteriously missing. Durk, sitting stoically in his seat, reportedly clenched his jaw as the federal team laid out their fabricated narrative. It was a move designed to rattle him, and it almost worked. As the session wrapped, with no ruling on release and the judge postponing yet again to review the new material, Lil Durk's patience had visibly eroded. He shot a glare at the prosecution bench that said more than words ever could. But it was what happened after the courtroom recess that truly escalated the situation into madness. Eyewitnesses say that as Durk was being escorted out of the chamber by court officers, two members of the prosecution team, described as younger agents with reputations for aggressive tactics, approached him in the hallway. What followed was a tense exchange of words, barely audible but deeply heated. According to insiders, the prosecutors mocked Durk, saying things like, "You'll never see daylight again, and we own you now." One even reportedly insinuated that Durk's music would be forgotten by next year. It was psychological warfare. But here's the twist: Durk didn't take the bait. He stayed silent. He stared them down. He did not swing. But one of the prosecutors did, without warning, and reportedly in full view of security cameras. One of the agents threw a sharp elbow into Durk's chest. A full-contact punch, intended not to injure, but to provoke. Chaos erupted instantly. Guards stepped in. Lawyers shouted. Durk stumbled but didn't retaliate. A complete melee was narrowly avoided, and the prosecutor was pulled away by his own colleague. Now here's where things get serious. This was not just some emotional breakdown by an overzealous government worker. This was assault, plain and simple. And it happened to a man currently in custody, restrained by both the law and literal handcuffs of the justice system. The footage, currently under court seal, is said to be damning, and if released, could flip the entire power dynamic of Durk's case on its head. Durk's lawyers immediately filed a complaint demanding sanctions, citing not only misconduct, but potential civil rights violations. They argued that the prosecution's actions were intentionally inflammatory, and that using physical provocation against a high-profile defendant, with the hope of baiting him into an outburst, is a gross abuse of power. As for fake evidence, the defense is not backing down. They're now demanding a full audit of every submission made by the prosecution in the past 6 months. They've brought in a private forensics team to examine the files in question, and if it's proven that the materials were falsified, it could lead to charges, not against Durk, but against the very people trying to keep him locked up. Let that sink in. The federal prosecution may have overplayed their hand so badly, they can now be the ones under investigation. Meanwhile, Durk's fans and fellow artists are rallying harder than ever. Hashtags like #JusticeForDurk and #DurkWasSetUp have begun trending on social media. Several artists, including Meek Mill and Lil Baby, have voiced support, with some even hinting at staging protests outside the courthouse. Behind bars, Durk's morale remains complicated. Those close to him say he's angry but focused, shaken but sharp, He knows now more than ever that the eyes of the world are watching, and any slip, any reaction could be used against him. That's the terrifying part of this whole ordeal. It was a setup, and not just with the evidence, but with the punch. Prosecutors weren't looking for justice. They were looking for a reaction. They wanted Durk to lash out, to swing back, to create the narrative of a violent, uncontrollable man who belongs behind bars. They wanted him to play into the image they painted of him. And when he didn't, they exposed their hand for all to see. What happens next is uncertain, but several possible outcomes are now on the table. 1. The prosecutors could face suspension or even criminal charges